Good day. In this PowerPoint presentation, we will be looking at the SIAS referral pathway. If we look at the top rectangle, the blue one, it says teacher or parent or guardian or health practitioner identifies learner as experiencing barriers to learning. What is important to note here is that the parent is part of the process from the very beginning. It is very important to inform the parent the moment we've identified barriers to learning, and then also to utilize the parent's input. It is a team effort. If we look at the oval, the purple oval, on the right-hand side of a slide, it says parent and learner involvement. It is important to note that the SIAS process is not something that is being done to the learner. The learner should be an active role player throughout because the learner needs to take responsibility for his or her own learning. And if a learner participates, it's much easier to identify the reasons for the barriers to learning as well as to evaluate our intervention strategies. We will first of all be looking at the problem-solving framework. Step one would be the acknowledgement that there is a need. Now, it is very important to have the parents on board from step one. So once we've identified that there is a need, we must make an appointment with the parents and explain it to them. If a parents fail to acknowledge that their child has a barrier to learning, they may hinder the intervention process by either refusing to sign forms, referral forms, or by negative talk and influencing their child negatively. If a parent fails to acknowledge that there is a need, it might be necessary to ask a senior colleague or the LST or even the LSA to have a conversation with the parent and once again explain the situation to them. Then we also need to identify what that need is. Step two would be to build an understanding of the need. Not just the educator, but it is important to help the parent to understand what this need is and also the learner. Once again, this is not something that's being done to the learner. The learner should be part of the whole process. Step three would be to identify the support needed. We will be looking at the different barriers to learning in follow-up sessions. And during these sessions, we will also be talking about support that can be provided with regards to certain or specific barriers to learning. Then we need to identify who will provide the support. Now, in round one, if we may call it that way, the people responsible for providing the support will always be the teacher and the parent, working together as a team. Once they've provided the support, they need to evaluate whether the support was successful. If they've found that the support is not successful, then further referral will take place. Now, let us look at the intervention process. The intervention process is all about observation and record keeping. It is important that we keep record of the intervention strategies that we apply. Why? Because the department, when we refer the child to the department wants to know what we've done in order to address the problem. If it is found that we as a school has done very little, then it will also hinder the referral process. For instance, a child that's referred to a special school will not be accepted, as it will be said that there was not sufficient intervention. First of all, the class teacher identifies the learning barrier and then completes the SNA1. Now, the SNA1 is important in the sense that it identifies the barriers and also it explains what the teacher will be doing in order to assist the learner, because we need to adjust our teaching methods and strategies as well as the environment in order to accommodate all our learners. When we fill in the SNA1, we need to be as specific as possible. Filling in the observation sheet or the SNA1 and saying that Johnny can't speak is really too vague. Does it mean that he does not have a voice, or that there's problems with his vocal cords, or that he is stuttering? Does it mean that he is too scared or shy to speak? As you can see, it raises more questions than answers. In 2, the class teacher implements basic support strategies and then keeps a record thereof. That is why the general observation sheet is so important. It is not expected that we write essays, but we just use specific words. Instead of saying Yanni can't speak, we say Yanni could not present his oral due to the fact that he does not have a sufficient vocabulary, or he doesn't have anybody at home to assist him to prepare, etc. When the teacher sees that intervention is needed, there is a process that should be followed. But this does not happen when it's an emergency. We will once again look at the referral process in case of certain incidents in following presentations. If, however, we notice that our interventions are not working, then we can refer the learner to the SBST. Now, we need to, as teachers, WhatsApp the learner's name and surname, the learner's SIAS number, and the issue or the problem to the LST. It is extremely difficult if I walk in the passages and people stop me and start talking randomly about random children. I listen, I hear, I take note, I give advice. But I walk on and the next person stops me and I forget about the previous case. Then, a few days later, somebody stops me again and they want to talk about the same learner and I have no idea whom they're talking about. Or I had a SBST referral page, but what happens is I'm busy teaching and then a child would knock on the door and give me a page. I am busy focusing on the learners in my class, and so I put the page down and I forget about it. And eventually it disappears amongst a mountain of paperwork. So I've devised another idea. There's 2 avenues. Either we WhatsApp the LST with the learner's name and surname, the learner's SIAS number, and the issue or the problem, or we will have a book. Now, currently I'm the SBST coordinator, but we will leave a book at a colleague who will hopefully volunteer, and you can write the referral in the book. Then an SBST meeting will be convened, and when you attend the meeting, you need to have a record of your own interventions. It is very easy just to refer a child so that I need not have to bother with this child. But the first person who's responsible for interventions is the class teacher. I also need a completed SNA 1 and an empty SNA 2 and an ISB, so that the SNA 2 and the ISB can be completed during the SBST meeting. When support needs are complex and challenging, then we refer to the SBST. Once again, if you talk to me in the passages, I am going to forget. Please WhatsApp me or write in the SBST book. During the SBST meeting, the SBST members discuss the case and give advice. During the meeting, the teacher will then complete the SNA 2. As the SBST brainstorm the problem, they will come up with ideas and intervention strategies, which will help the teacher to compile a new ISP or add to the original individual support plan. Intervention then still takes place in the classroom. At this stage, the child will also or might also be withdrawn by the LST. Please note that a copy, not the original, but a copy of the SNA 1, the SNA 2, and the ISB should be handed in no later than a week after the SBST meeting. At this stage, the caregivers or the parents should have been informed already. When we come to the SBST meeting, the SNA 1 should already have been signed. That shows that 1, the parent is aware that his or her child is being discussed, and 2, that the teacher has already discussed the barriers to learning with the parent. Please remember that it's a team effort. If more support is needed, the SBST again reviews the problem. You'll note that there's been 2 SBST meetings before a child is referred to the district-based support team. We are not supposed to be taking shortcuts. Many times we look at a child and we know that this child should be referred in the first place. But if we follow the correct process and protocols set out by the department, we will see that the class teacher must first implement intervention strategies, keep a record thereof, fill in the SNA 1, and then refer the child to the SBST for further discussions if they have evaluated their own intervention strategies and found that it does not work. Then the SBST will recommend intervention strategies, which once again will be put in place by the class teacher and in this case, the LST as well. Once we've seen that these intervention strategies still has no effect on this problem, only then do we refer the child to the district-based support team. In order to do that, there's a lot of forms that need to be filled in. Documentation as part of a referral process. First of all, when we refer to the district-based support team, there is a summary page that the LST will complete. You will notice that the LST needs the CMIS number of a child as well as the grades that were repeated. The LST also needs to know when the child is attending school. Now, this, of course, will fall away once Corona or COVID-19 is no longer an aspect that we need to take into consideration and all the children come back to school. In the referral form, this form must also be filled in by the learning support teacher. You will notice that it asks the child's ID number and a lot of information that I get from the child's profile. But it also asks the parent's ID number, which is not on the profile, and therefore you will receive a package that I send home, wherein I ask for certain details that I cannot find in the child's profile. In the SNA 1, this is the responsibility of a class teacher, and it must be signed by the parent. If it's not signed by the parent, the district-based support team will not even look at the referral. What I sometimes do is I contact the parent, I explain the situation, or I write a letter and I tell the parent, we've already discussed your child. I would like to refer your child to the district-based support team. Here's the back page of SNA1. Would you kindly sign it? Most parents do not have a problem in doing so. The correct process, however, would be to have a conversation one-on-one, face-to-face with the parent, and then explain the whole situation to the parent and ask the parent to sign the document. Then SNA2 and ISP should be included. DBE 120, that is the responsibility of a learning support teacher. And the DBE 120 must, of course, be signed by the SBST coordinator, the parent, and the principal. Therefore, the DBE 120 will also be included in the package that is sent home to the parent. The LST's scholastic test report, I will ask you to send the learner to my classroom and I will test the learner scholastically and type out a report which will then be included within the documentation. A fully completed learner profile. Of course, all of these are copies of original. We never send in originals. A copy of a learner's birth certificate. Now you see why it is so important for us to have that in the learner's profile. Otherwise, I need to request it from the parent and it takes more time. A copy of a learner's school report. In this case, it will be the copy of a previous year's school report. In other words, December 2020. A copy of a learner's work. We need a copy of a learner's home language, and it needs to be a copy that one can actually read. If I wrote in pencil, then we need to put the copier machine darker in order to actually see what the child wrote. In home language, they like an essay or a comprehension test. They do not want a page where the learner simply had to fill in words. Then also a copy of a learner's mathematics. Once again, they don't just want a page where the learner wrote down a summary from the board or where they just filled in answers. They actually want to see calculations. And then any other relevant reports like doctor reports, psychological reports, reports from the OT or the speech therapist. So let's recap. The class teacher reads the learner's profile and sees notes that were made by the previous year's educator. They have an interview with the parent and the parent says something in the line of, my child has always struggled with mathematics since grade 1. Now, the teacher suspects that there are barriers to learning. We cannot just go by hearsay. We need to identify whether these barriers are still presenting challenges, because learners mature, develop, and change. So, once again, the teacher will do his or her own screening based on assessments. And yes, we may look at the previous year's schedule, but once again, the child might have developed. So we look at our own work, our classwork and facts. And if there are still red flags, either we see that the barriers that were identified by the previous teacher are still there, or we've identified new barriers, then the class teacher fills in the SNA1 as well as compile the ISP or the GSP. Now, the GSP is just the group support plan. If I have 3 children in my class and all 3 of these children experience challenges with regards to phonemic awareness, for instance, I am not going to compile 3 separate ISPs that look exactly the same. I will write all 3 children's names on one form and then write out my intervention strategies on that form. If, however, after applying these intervention strategies, differentiating the curriculum either through the teacher's teaching methods or the teaching material or adjusting the environment, if all of these did not show any results, then we refer to the SBST. During the SBST meeting, the educator completes the SNA2 and the ISP. And the SBST should also look at resources in and around the community or the school community to see if there's any extra help that can be utilized in order to assist the learner. They make suggestions, and these suggestions are then implemented in class. If a teacher then, after a while, sees that there's still no improvement, they go back to the SBST and then the learner should be referred to the district-based support team. Now, in order to do that, DBE 120 needs to be completed. That is the task of a learning support teacher. Once it's referred to the DBST, I'm not going to continue with the whole process. They are supposed to give feedback in the form of a report, suggestions, etc. This, however, takes a very long time as one team is responsible for around about 20 schools. And within each school, there's a lot of children that are being referred. And so this process may take up to 6 months. They will then make certain recommendations, which I'm not going to discuss right now. Thank you for working through this presentation with me. I would just like to ask that you please be so kind as to answer the following 2 questions and then hand it in when you sign the sheet that confirm that you have listened to this presentation. The reason I'm asking you to answer these 2 questions is 1, when we answer questions about a presentation that we've seen, it shows aspects or it highlights aspects that we do not understand yet, and that allows us to go back and just quickly look at it again. Secondly, it helps the presenter, which is me in this case, to identify certain aspects that weren't addressed or weren't explained properly and that I should address again. So I would just like to thank you for your cooperation, and then also please remember to sign the sheet at the Secretary's office to confirm that you have actually listened to this presentation. Have a blessed day.